Podcast.
Welcome back to the Upper Tier Podcast with a very special episode that just dropped today. The sacking of Frank Lampard. Blue is the colour. Blue is also the feeling, I would imagine, today for these Chelsea fans. We are the Upper Tier Podcast, brought to you by the Dynamo Podcast Network. Head over to YouTube there, smash that subscribe button, give it a like and a share, and support Irish podcasting. And joining me today, friends of the show and long-time friends, Alex Byrne. Alex, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, man. I was a lot better before I woke up this morning, look at Sky Sports and thought, wait, hang on a minute, we won yesterday.
Yeah.
That was my first thought. I was like, what, we won? Just kind of shocked at the moment, really. I mean, it's kind of one of those, I expected this to happen for a while, but now that it's actually happened, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It's a weird feeling, man. It's a really weird feeling.
Yeah. I wrote a piece on the page there. I wrote it last week about how Lampard needed to be given time. And I only posted the piece yesterday because I wanted to see how the FA Cup tie went, which went really, really well. Team played well and all, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then this morning I wake up to Lampard potentially getting sacked, Tuchel coming in, and it all just unfolded. Also joining us on the episode today is friend of the family and friend of the show, Jacob Browner. Jacob, how are you doing?
I'd say I'm the same as Alex here. Didn't expect this news today. Didn't expect it for another few weeks at least. But we know that board of directors, and it could have happened whenever. And after a few poor games, it doesn't surprise me he's gone.
Yeah. Okay. So I suppose we should get into it then. Where do we begin? Tell me. Like, obviously you're not happy. He's a club legend, lads. And it's hard. It's kind of hard to take. Probably for you, Alex. Do you feel he was given enough time? He was obviously given the support in terms of financial support to players. One of the questions I always ask is, were they his signings? Are they his signings, or was it Roman flexing his financial clout?
I think that in terms of Frank, in terms of the time, that it was a funny season because, I mean, this season is unlike any other season that we've seen. You know, first of all, what I'll say is there was no pre-season. Like, he didn't have a chance to kind of take these players on tour. He didn't have a chance to bring them in and kind of put his own philosophy in. Be like, this is how I want to play. These are all the lads. So, I mean, based on last season, I was a firm believer of last season. He did great. He came in, transfer ban, first season in the Premier League, got the team to an FA Cup final, got the team to the Champions League knockout stages, got the team fourth spot in the league. So I was like, Jesus, he's done well. But I also said when he starts signing these players, if he goes out and he spends this money now, then the pressure is really on. Then he has to give results. Like, I mean, I love Frank. Like, I mean, growing up, he was my favorite player at Chelsea. And it's a case of, I think there was some rumors that maybe Havertz wasn't his signing. But at the same time, if we're realistic about this, he is a club legend. We absolutely love Frank Lampard. We always will. But as sad as I am, if you look at it from, I suppose, a football and a business point of view, which Chelsea have, I'm sure Abramovich is looking, going, you spent £220 million of my money and you're in 8th position in the league. What's going on here?
What about Jacob in terms of the players he brought in? I was talking to guys during the week there, and I was saying, you basically nearly have a whole new back line and a keeper that has to bed in. Obviously, Thiago was brought in to bring in that bit of experience. And then up front, you have, there's a lot of youth there and a lot of guys that have come in, and it's kind of like, that needs a lot of time to bed in. Now, admittedly, the arguments come true that, what's Werner doing out on the wing? Why isn't he playing up the middle? And then you have, the other viewpoint is, well, it's Frank being loyal to the players that got him to the dance and the youth from last season. What's your feeling on that, Jacob?
Well, I mean, for the most part, I've been happy with the signings, especially the lads at the back. I think Kepa, he needed to be replaced. We even saw yesterday, really soft goal to let in against Luton. I think Thiago Silva and Zuma, they've been, the two best centre backs for us, and I think Chilwell as well has been like a key player for the team. And Werner, it's getting painful at this stage. I think he is good, and I think he will eventually, get a bit more, confident. But I mean, 1v1 against the keeper, gets taken down there against Luton, misses the penalty. I mean, that can't be good for any player. So hopefully with time, we see a bit more of an improvement, but hopefully it's soon.
Alex, what's your thinking on that in terms of players brought in and, the talk of players being out of position and obviously Frank's loyalty to the youth that brought him to the dance last season and all? What's your thinking on that?
I think he is loyal to the youth players that got him there last season. But I mean, at the same time, if you look at this season, when you look at Mason Mount the way he's playing, look at Reece James the way he's playing. I mean, these are players that, in my opinion, deserve to be in the team anyway. Like, I mean, the last few games, although it's been a bad run of form, the bright spark has been Mason Mount. He's been fantastic. In terms of the new signings, look, I would agree with that point in the sense that, like, Werner especially, like, he was smashing in a few goals earlier in the season. I was thinking, Jesus, he looks really well, but he is playing out on the left wing. So it's a case of, when players have, been playing out of position, you've got like Hakim Ziyech, who was injured. I think in one game we had against Brighton before the season started, he injured his thigh. Obviously, Havertz is out with the coronavirus. So these players have been played out of position. But it goes back to, I suppose, my point about pre-season, that they've been in and out of the team. They haven't been able to get a run. So it has been hard trying to get them all mixed in. Like, people have to remember, like, this is only Frank's second season in the Premier League. So it's a case of you have to try and get all these players on side, all of these big kind of egos coming into the dressing room as well. So it's a fairly difficult job for any manager. And I think that, I suppose the most frustrating part for me is that it was going so well. If you look at October, November, we were top of the league. We were beating teams. There was a stage between Europe and between the Premier League. We had a 17-game unbeaten run. And, walked the Champions League group, smashed Sevilla away. And I was sitting there thinking, like, geez, like, this team is really playing well. But I think there was always that sense of, one bad result and then all of a sudden, panic would set in. That seems to be what happened. We lost, I believe it was to Everton, which ended the unbeaten streak. Then all of a sudden, alarm bells are going off. The media was saying, I don't think Frank knows what he's doing. And like that's got to affect him. Like, I know he was saying it doesn't affect him, but that's got to affect anybody like that. As soon as, like a light switch, bang, all of a sudden you've gone from hero to zero in the media's eyes.
Especially such a young manager in his managerial career, and you look at that Chelsea job there, it's a fantastic job to get. It's a huge job in football to get as well, because you go in there, you're going to get the financial backing, but with Roman being so trigger happy, you're going to get you better deliver because he's going to support you financially, and there can be, little or no excuses really,
Yeah.
The one thing I've been saying to people is because there's so much youth in the squad now, and as you said, no pre-season, there was definitely a case for giving them time. But the other argument to that is, if he didn't carry the legacy of the club, let's suppose he wasn't a club legend.
Yeah.
Would you guys have been calling for him to go? I mean, I know the Everton game kind of started the ripple, but the Arsenal game was significant. And I was listening to Sky Sports there this morning, and there was reports coming in saying that this is not a trigger decision. This decision was made weeks ago. And, that's not unusual when you look at Frank's post-match interviews. He's been talking about, they've been very indifferent in terms of, he was talking like a man who was kind of out the door. What you thinking on that?
I think that, to your point with the Arsenal game, I know that was a real kind of turning point. It wasn't just the fact that we lost; it was the way we lost. We got up against an Arsenal team that they were making jokes, hadn't won in this amount of games and that amount of games. And I was actually speaking to a very good friend of mine earlier, who was a massive Chelsea fan, has loved Lampard as a player, but he said, "Look, as soon as we lost that Arsenal game, that was the last straw for me." Because I remember sitting there going, like, this team, like, I think they'd lost at home to Villa, they'd lost at home to Burnley, and then they're playing us off the park. So I know the players have said that. The Athletic did a very good report on Frank saying what was going on behind the scenes. And a lot of players said that they'd kind of lost faith in the sense that, they didn't understand his decision with tactics. They didn't understand, why certain players were playing in this position and stuff like that. And I think in the last few kind of weeks that's shown, we look kind of so good in some games in that 17-game run that I mentioned earlier. We look great. But in particularly probably since the Arsenal game, the players have looked completely demotivated and they look like they've had the head down and just haven't been interested. And he is a club legend. Like, I love Frank, and to your point, yes, I think that if it was anybody else, we would have been calling for his head. We saw a lot of stick that Sarri was getting a couple of seasons ago, and he was the manager. And I mean, he finished third and won the Europa League. He wasn't necessarily, didn't necessarily do a bad job, but I think it's his long-standing with the club that helped him as well, and the sense that we have sacked managers for less. Let's be honest. This is Roman's Tuchel, potentially is Roman's 15th manager in a 17-year spell in charge of Chelsea. So. Look, it's just unfortunate. I think it's a case of, if you look at it purely taking emotion out of it, it is a sense of underachievement, in the sense that, £220 million spent, ninth place potentially in the league, results go against us. But the fact that it's Frank, I don't know about yourself, Jacob, but like, I've never wanted a manager at Chelsea to do well more than Frank. I just hope so much that he would succeed.
Definitely, I'd be the same with that. And I thought this would be the exception. I thought he would, Frank would be the one that gets the job for longer than anyone else. Like we see once Chelsea start performing badly and the media start talking, you may as well be packing your bags, because it's not an easy job to hold on to. I thought it'd be different for Frank. We know he has, a good personal relationship with Roman Abramovich. I thought, he's well respected by all the club. But when I started hearing these reports, especially this morning, that he was about to go, I didn't want it to happen, but I like, as I said, I certainly wasn't surprised, because it is such a hard job to hold on to.
Yeah, like something I was saying to people, I was like, obviously you're probably the same as me. You got a flood of texts in as soon as this was happening from both sides of the aisle. But my thing was, they were saying, what do you think? And I suppose the only way I summed it up was, look, I'm sad to see him go. I love Frank. I want it to work. But as sad as it is, I can understand where they're coming from. There is the argument for time to be given, but there's also the argument of, the money spent in the position in the league. And I'd listen to both, because it's just really, the word I use is unfortunate. It's just such an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing I'm hearing from Chelsea fans over the last few weeks, and I've noticed it myself, there's a kind of a weirdness, like in terms of, there's no like pattern of play or plan or anything like that. You know what I mean? And that's what seems to be coming through. And if you look at some of those games where it went a bit skew ways, like he was leaving it too late to make substitutions to influence the game. He wasn't giving people enough time to try and come on and try and rescue something, that kind of thing. He was kind of using Giroud kind of when it suited him, who I think is fundamental up front for you, is because you've got so much youth up front. You need that experience up front to grab these guys and say, listen, this is how we're going to do, and we're going to get around this. And I think that was missing at times, and he didn't pull the trigger on those substitutions quick enough. So technically, he was probably a little bit naive. And I mean, that's fine. He's still a young manager, still trying to learn the game in terms of from a managerial point of view. The other thing that Chelsea fans have been saying to me is, he sort of looked a very lonely figure the last 4 or 5 games. You know what I mean? He's standing there on his own. I know obviously Jody Morris is there, who was the youth coach and stuff like that, and also a Chelsea legend, no doubt about it. But I wonder how much influence Jody had on Frank's thinking in terms of playing the youth, especially the youth from last season. And the other point I'd raise just before you jump in is, maybe overachieving last year set the bar a little bit too high, because I know the expectation in the first few months was, actually, we're going to win the league. We signed all these players, and these are like goal face monsters. You know what I mean? This is not going to be a problem. What you're thinking on those kind of points coming out from the fan base?
I think that in terms of the youth, Jody Morris is the perfect example to kind of promote the youth. When Chelsea won all those youth cups throughout the last few years, Jody Morris was our youth team manager. So he's worked with these players since they were boys, basically, and that's got to play a role. But I think that in terms of last season, you do make a good point, because like, I know when the 2019-20 season started, we came in, we lost 4-0 against United on the opening day. And I remember sitting there going, look, I'd be happy, to be honest, with even top 6 this season. Like, we've got a transfer ban with this, but we played some great stuff that season. Like, we had some really good games as well. Like, I mean, beating City at home, we beat Spurs home and away. We had the 4-4 against Ajax at Stamford Bridge as well. Like, I was actually at that game. That was the best game I've ever been to in my entire life. And I just remember thinking, like, when the season ended, we got Champions League, and I was like, my God, I was like, this is incredible. Like, he's done all this, and now he's getting these players in, and now we're going to do this and that. So, yeah, I mean, I think that when you finish fourth, and when you've had such a good season, even if you don't have that, when you spend, I go back to my point about spending 220 million on a squad of all these different players, especially attackers, I think minimum requirement, you have to be thereabouts challenging for the title. I mean, that's just the way it is. I listened to Pep Guardiola earlier, because they were interviewing a manager about Frank Lampard, and he put it very well, actually. He said, look, you can talk about your philosophy and talk about these projects you want to do. He says, in the game the way it is now, unless you get results, that's it.
Yeah, you kind of live and die by them, don't you, really? Jacob, what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think last year he kind of had a bit more leeway with the transfer ban. everyone, the board, the fans, everyone was happy with top four because you would never have seen at the start of the season. And I think that was kind of with all the money that's been put in the team this season compared to last year, it's the main reason he's like, been so heavily criticized, because you have spent 200 million, and with that much money spent, eighth place, especially at a club like Chelsea, it's just not good enough.
Yeah.
How do we feel, lads, in terms of his legacy? I would say, as a Liverpool fan, I've always been a Frank Lampard fan, and I think anyone who follows football, if you're not a Frank Lampard fan, there's obviously something wrong with you, because he's absolute of the highest level of a baller,
Yeah.
in the Premiership. But I just think, how do you feel? Does this affect his legacy in any way, or do you see sometime down the road, maybe when he gets a bit more experience, could he come back and fix what he started maybe and have another go, or do you think that would be it done?
Well, I suppose never say never. I mean, we've seen, for example, Jose Mourinho come back to the bridge. Like, and when he left in 2007, it was quite a bad breakup, and we think, we'll never get him back. But I mean, time heals in football. We know that. Like, after a while, these kind of woods can go away and come back. I think in terms of Frank's legacy, look, with the trophies that he won at the club, and he's a record goal scorer, and like he was involved in our best period ever in the history of the club. I think that, regardless of what he did as manager, like, because it was never going to affect his legacy. I know some people that were saying, look, can't stand him as a manager, want him out, but I'll never forget what he was like as a player. Like, I mean, I think he's just at that level. He's like, as Liverpool with Gerrard. I mean, he did that much as a player, and he was that iconic. I think that regardless of anything that's happened, like, it wasn't, let's face facts, it wasn't like he got us relegated. Like, he had a good first season, then, a mixed bag of a second season. I think his legacy at the club will, no, like, that'll never be broken. What he did with the club and everything like that, he's untouchable, I think, in terms of his legacy.
How do you feel, Jacob?
I think he's our top goal scorer. Left the club, came back as a manager, got us top four, FA Cup final. I don't think a few bad games towards the end of his, him as a manager anyway, I don't think it's gonna, cause too much damage to his reputation or his legacy or anything like that. I think in terms of him coming back, I think definitely the next thing I'd be looking out for is his next move. Is he going to stay at a high level club? Is he going to go back to a team of the same level as Derby? I think that's what the big thing is now.
So, Jacob, if you were going to give him advice, what would you be telling him to do? What would be your thinking at the moment?
God, I'd say, go to a club. If he's continuing managing anyway, I'd say go to a club that you can take on, a challenge to prove yourself. But going down, he's still young, down a level. Managing definitely wouldn't do any harm to him. Or even if you want to stay at the same level, if he can prove himself there, that's even better.
What do you think, Alex? What would you be saying to him tonight? Because obviously these managers, when they get sacked, they normally fly off to Barbados or the Bahamas or something like that, and they get away for a few weeks to take stock. But obviously during these times, he can't do that. So he's probably sitting at home at the moment getting bombarded with stuff from media and socials and stuff like that. Now, if you could give him one piece of advice, what would you say to him today as a Chelsea
I think
fan?
it'd be quite similar to what Jacob said. Like, I mean, I think the only thing about this kind of sacking, like, this isn't your kind of typical manager sacking. Like, the fact that he's so connected to Chelsea, I think this is going to hurt him more, because I was actually watching back his first press conference when he took over as Chelsea manager back in 2019. And he said, I was happy at Derby, it was going well. And he said, it is basically a Dalton task. It's the only reason I took a club of this stature is because of the club it is. He says, because it's Chelsea, because I was here for 13 years, he said, I love this club. And I think that, managers will get sacked. It's part of the game, unfortunately. Like, it happens to so many top managers. But I think this one will hurt him a lot because of the club it is. My advice to him would be, look, maybe, it's obviously been a stressful period for him. Maybe even take a sabbatical, take a little while out of the game, go into punditry for a while, enjoy yourself. And maybe, to your point, Jacob, take a step down into maybe a lower division. I saw a report earlier actually linking them with the Celtic job if they let him leave. To be honest, I think that could be a good move from, like, you saw, obviously Gerrard is doing great over there with Rangers. They're having a fantastic season. But I use the example of Brendan Rodgers. Like Brendan Rodgers had that great season with Liverpool where he won the league, but the season after that, I mean, it was a disaster. And then the season after that, he got sacked halfway through. He took a while out. He went up to Celtic, rebuilt his career up there, showed he was a good manager, won, I think, the 3 trebles he won with them, and came back and got the Leicester job. And he had that extra bit of experience. And looking at him with Leicester now, he's flying. So I would hope that Frank would follow the same suit. I hope this doesn't turn him off management because he's still kind of so young in his managerial career. I think it'd be a shame that if he, kind of dropped out into some of that, because I really think he could do well in years to come.
He's a footballing guy, isn't he? He has to be involved. He's not one of those guys that just walk away. Wouldn't it be crazy to see him and Gerrard going against each other in the Scottish League? That could be the recipe that actually builds up that interest in the Scottish League again, to be honest, you know what I mean? Because it looks like Gerrard's going to walk it this year by the looks of things with Rangers. And, obviously, Celtic are struggling big time. They're going through a transition and stuff like that, which is so unusual for Celtic,
Yeah.
But that would be crazy. I suppose, when you look at it, it's just, the feeling is it's nearly like you've lost a buddy, isn't it, really, as opposed to like, another manager. It's like, you just grew up on him. He was fantastic. Yeah. He was an unbelievable player. You've watched him for years and years and years be so successful, and that driving force at Chelsea between himself and John Terry and all, and that Chelsea clique that was in there that drove it to success. You know what I mean? And then when he got the job, clearly, like if you're offered the Chelsea job, you can't refuse it. You know what I mean? These things only come around once in a lifetime at times. So he couldn't refuse it, and especially with the history and all. And it was probably, in hindsight, probably just a step too far. You know what I mean? It was just a bit too much, really. For him to jump in and to be trying to manage players of that ilk this season with those price. I mean, to manage those guys to settle into the Premiership with the price tags on their head and the level of expectation was going to be a nightmare anyway. Before you even start talking about football or tactics or anything else. So look, I suppose you two boys as Chelsea fans, you wish him well. And hopefully he's going to get back in football sooner rather than later, at a level where he can prove himself again and maybe come back to the Premiership one day, and hopefully not to another team, because I think that would be terrible. He has to come back to Chelsea, wouldn't he? So then we move on. We move on to the new man, Thomas Tuchel. Alex, what's your feeling on him?
Thomas Tuchel, I mean, I like Thomas Tuchel. He's a good coach. Like, I know. Yeah, you could say he's won a lot with PSG, but then again, who doesn't win a lot with PSG in that league? I suppose his main achievement with them was getting to the Champions League final. And I'd be quite happy with Tuchel, given what's out there, the fact that, we're mid-season. Usually you got to get kind of the caretaker in for the last few months. You get your big manager in the summer. But I think that he'd be a good man to get in the sense that he's German, so we probably get, something out of Havertz. You might get something out of Werner. I think that he could come in and maybe, click with them straight away. But in terms of managers that are available now, but were available, the only kind of gripe I have is looking at this with Lampard's sack. If you got to, as you said, it's sad. We got to look and see what's going forward. My big takeaway was, as good as Tuchel is and I like him, a month ago, Pochettino was free. If this is a calculated decision, a month ago, you had, in my opinion, the best free agent manager you could have gotten. Like, the job he did at Tottenham was phenomenal. So, as much as I like Tuchel, if that had been Pochettino, I'd be like, okay, well, I'd be pretty excited by him.
And the argument comes true, like, if they've been thinking about this for a number of weeks, probably when they started thinking about it, and after that, Pochettino was still available. So, like, it's maybe Roman didn't fancy that because of the Spurs connection there. Maybe, I don't know, Jacob, what's your thinking on Thomas Tuchel?
Well, like, admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about him. He obviously has a pretty impressive resume, Champions League final last year, but at the same time, I'm quite skeptical. We saw it happen before, taking on PSG managers. We saw it with Emery, with Arsenal. It's a big jump going from, having Neymar and Mbappe doing all the work for you, scoring goals now, to managing in the Premier League. So, I wouldn't be disappointed if we got him. I'd definitely be excited and optimistic, but only time will tell with that one.
I think it's the German link there is key, isn't it? I mean, he spent some time at Dortmund and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's probably key there in terms of, Havertz and Werner and stuff like that. The one thing I would say about him is he'll have no problem managing reputations anyway. I mean, this is a man who's managed Neymar and Mbappe and Verratti and Di Maria. I mean, like, and you know what I mean? Like he's managed these big players, you know what I mean? So he'll have no problem. He won't be daunted by the task in terms of going in there to manage these guys. Um, you know what I would say about his record. Obviously, the Champions League last year. I mean, like he came up against the best team in world football at the time. You know what I mean? And they had their chances to do something. You know what I mean? In that final as well. He'll certainly be. He'll be the type of manager that'll come in and like he'll wipe the slate clean. What I would fear for is maybe some of the youth there. I don't know whether he'll support that or not, or whether he'll want those experienced players in there and those big signings in there. So like disappointment today. I wonder where it leaves the likes of Billy Gilmore and all. What you thinking on that, Alex?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point because I know Frank was kind of promoting the youth, but with the transfer ban, some people say, well, he did it out of necessity and he won't play the youth next season when he can bring in players. But we saw this season, he was still playing the youth players, so they were still a massive part of what he was doing. I think that the likes of Reece James, I think, could be okay. He is our first choice right back. It's himself and Azpilicueta, and as much as I love Azpilicueta, he doesn't have the legs that he wants it anymore. But yeah, the likes of Billy Gilmore, Mason Mount, Tammy Abraham, Callum Hudson-Odoi, these are boys that were playing in Frank's system. They were playing quite regularly. So I think that they might be skeptical of this coming in. I think it would be so sad to see if they were missing out because particularly Mason Mount, I know I mentioned him earlier on, but I know there was this joke that, he was Frank's son, he was undroppable, that Frank loved him. I saw one earlier saying, as he left Chelsea, he got X amount of money and Mason Mount. But I think that Mount, from what I saw this season, deserved his place in the team. Again, I think he's been our best player this season. So if he gets dropped because he's not a big name based on what he's done, I think that'd be very unfortunate.
Yeah, I think at times he's been one of those players that always looks like he's putting 100% in. You know what I mean? Like the Chelsea boy, that kind of way. Jacob, what's your thinking in Tuchel in terms of coming in terms of the youth?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what kind of system he has there. Whether I think Mount, he's definitely proven himself. I think he'd be okay. I think James as well has shown that he's ready for the challenge. I'd be interested to see, up front what he does there, whether he brings Werner to the striker, he keeps him out there, does Tammy stay in the team or does he go for Giroud with the experience? I don't know much about him. I don't know what type of players he plays or who he gives chances to, but, it'll be interesting to see what type of setup he goes for.
Now we're after entering into the last week of the transfer window. So I know this will bring a smile to the faces. Alex, do you reckon you're going to bring in anyone? Do you think Tuchel might just bring in one or two players now or just to shake it up a bit? Do you reckon maybe he had a bit of agreement there when he signed to come in?
Maybe. I mean, it's hard to say who he might try and, I suppose, raid from his old PSG team. But I think that's one thing with us. We're not lacking in players, if that makes sense. I don't think we have too many players. I don't know, maybe there is an agreement he can bring some people in, but I know that from reading the Athletics report, that was a big bone of contention with the transfer window. Frank, apparently, he had a complete falling out with the board and everything like that as well as the players. Apparently, his main transfer target for January was Declan Rice. And I think that the board got quite annoyed for whatever reason about Declan Rice coming in. I think it was a case of, well, you've signed all these players. Why do you want this guy? You've got this player and this player in this position. But, maybe Tuchel brings in some players. But I think that with the squad at the moment, part of the reason is maybe why the players weren't so one-sided is you've got a lot of players out in the fringes. You saw Rudiger apparently wasn't happy with him. Kovacic wasn't happy with him. Marcus Alonso wasn't happy with him. I'm not sure how happy Emerson was. Jorginho, they're kind of five big personalities in that team. So if, we can get somebody in, don't get me wrong. If he comes in from PSG and it says, after Tuchel, Mbappe's going to come in, I'd be like, I've got no problems with that. But I suppose unless it's an absolute superstar coming in the last week from his whole PSG team, I'm kind of going, where do we need the players? Because I don't think there's any doubt that, on paper, if you look at our squad from, squad number 1 to 23, we have a very, very talented squad. I don't think that was ever in question. I think people are looking at the start of the season going, that's a great squad. And I suppose that was one of my things about Frank. As much as I've loved the guy and spoken well, I kind of looked at that squad on paper and I saw the football we were playing in recent weeks and I was thinking, how can you have this squad playing this level of football? Like, how can you have this squad playing so poorly and without kind of ideas? So, maybe Tuchel has plans of bringing someone in this last week, but I think he needs to try and get the players he has on side first.
Yeah, I think it was a case of like, I mean, obviously stuff has been leaking, saying there's been a lot of stuff going on in the background and falling outs, and players not happy and this, that, and the other, and you know what I mean. So when that starts leaking out into the press, then like this is where players players hold the power. This is where they switch off and they go, you know what I mean. This man's a dead man walking, so who cares? It's going to be sorted out. You know what I mean. When you mention some of those players like Alonso and Jorginho, say, and Kovacic and all, like, to me, I don't see them as being Chelsea players. You know what I mean? I see the decision on them done. They're going to go out the door. That's why. Hence, I asked the reason in terms of. I mean, Jacob, do you see any transfers potentially coming in? Do you think you might drop in one or two players?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like I'd be worried about him overcomplicating it. You know what I mean? Bringing in more players. We are just stacked with players at the moment, and compared to last year, where the team just picked itself. You know what I mean? Now we have so many players competing for positions. I don't. I'm into. I wouldn't be surprised if no one comes in. But I think in terms of players going out, I definitely see that happen. We've a lot of players there that have value but aren't being played. So in terms of coming in, I don't see much happening. But going out, I wouldn't be surprised if a few players go.
Well, you would kind of assume, wouldn't you, that like the conversations with Tuchel have been going on. I mean, Roman didn't ring Thomas Tuchel this morning. You know what I mean, for a chat. Asked him was he interested in a job in London. So I'm sure like there's been long conversations there about ideas and plans and stuff like that. I myself probably wouldn't be surprised if one or two players came in just to shake it up there and shake up the system a bit and give people a bit of, put people on notice, that it's a new regime and this is the way it's going to be, you know what I mean? And Tuchel would be astute enough in the European market. I don't know whether Tuchel would be astute enough in terms of the Premiership and the likes of Declan Rice and stuff like that. No, but certainly if you look at the German league and you look at the Leipzigs and the Dortmunds of this world who have some quality players in there, he'd be well aware of them. Plus, I'd imagine there'd be a number of French players there that he'd have an eye on coming in, But it's going to be interesting. I mean, his first game is going to be interesting in terms of, like, he's going to have to hit the ground running, you know what I mean? And he's going to have to. My guess is Werner's going to go up the middle. There's no doubt about it. I think if Werner starts out on the wing again, I think you have to ask yourself what's changed.
Yeah.
In reality, bar the name, What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I was going to say that's a big thing, because Werner playing as a left winger definitely didn't help his cause. He's a player that when he plays for the middle is where he's most dangerous. And you mentioned there about Tuchel having to hit the ground running, and you're so right. I know his first kind of few games is we've got Wolves, we've got Burnley, I think we've got Barnsley in the cup, but our February period is extremely tough. We got Tottenham away, we've United at home, we've Atletico Madrid, both legs of the Champions League. So I mean, he's going to have to get, I suppose, stuff together fairly fast. There's going to be no kind of come in and, slow and build up, get his philosophy. Like these are games that he really has to come in and try and, hit hard and try and get results out of.
Yeah, what you're thinking, Jacob, he's going to have to start fairly fast, isn't he? Especially if you've got your eye on potentially, reaching top four this season. It's going to have to happen very quick.
Yeah, definitely. And I can see him switching up the team a lot, and I hope he does because Werner playing out in the wing, I hope that was just a Lampard thing because we've seen it doesn't work. He's a goal scorer. He likes getting in behind, and out in the wing, it was new for him, and it was hard to watch it sometimes. So hopefully, he knows Thiago Silva from PSG. He knows how good Thiago Silva is. Those long balls. I've been saying it all season. It was really frustrating in whatever match it was. You could see Tammy Abraham, the likes of him, and Pulisic making runs in behind, and there's no balls going in there. It's just constantly left and right passing around, and hopefully that's one thing I'd love to see if he gets Thiago Silva playing those long balls again, switching it up a lot more direct football. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, a lot of those top teams at the moment are really suffering from no pre-season, aren't they? If you had pre-season, like a lot of that stuff could be ironed out within a 3 or 4 week pre-season, but 2 weeks to hit the ground running with so many changes and so many signings, it was definitely a step too far. So how are you looking forward to the rest of the season, Alex? What do you expect to happen now? Tuchel coming in. I mean, what's your expectations say for the season now?
Well, the expectation is, I suppose, look, it's not, I suppose, our usual panic button of, look, oh, we'll get Gus Hiddink in until the summer. We've done that twice. I was thinking it's third time looking at that. But yeah, look, I mean, look, at the end of the day, if we take the emotion of it, because it's a very, look, it's a sad day what's happened with Frank. I mean, you're looking at a club now, and it hurts me to say we've sacked our best manager, most successful manager of all time twice, and then we've sacked our record goal scorer as manager. So, in terms of the rest of the season, if I have to look at it, because again, you got to move on and have a look. I would hope that given Tuchel's pedigree and his experience, he could, challenge for the top four. Hopefully, get us in there come the season. Then, to your point, Jacob, he's worked with Thiago Silva. He worked with Christian Pulisic when he was at Dortmund.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, there are players in there that he will have on his side when he comes in, I guess. So I don't know. It's just he has to come in and hopefully he can turn it around. Hopefully he can stamp his authority on the team, get it playing his way. But I suppose he has to do it very quickly. I mean, we got Wolves on Wednesday night, and then we got Burnley, I think it is, on Sunday. So, he's going to have to come in and do it quickly. And look, I hope he can. As a fan, as much as it hurts now, you only want what's best for your team going forward. And hopefully, if we can get top four and a cup run. So, I suppose if we get top four and a cup run, we've got the same season as last season, and it just costs us a manager and 220 million.
Yeah.
Well, you would expect to get a good bounce out of it, wouldn't you? Really, because you've a new manager coming in, it's a clean slate. He's obviously going to, pick what he regards as his top 11. Those players are going to want to impress, so they're going to step it up by 10 or 20% at least. Jacob, what's your thoughts for the rest of the season? What are you expecting out of Chelsea, or what you feel is going to happen?
Yeah, I think it's a good point that Alex made, is that, and I think the players need to be ready from the start. Hopefully, he can get them on their side, and they're ready to move on with a new system, new manager. And I think the sooner they kick into gear, the sooner they start playing the football that the manager wants, and they have that good relationship, the better, because it is kind of that time of the season that and the points start to slip away. The top teams right around after Christmas start to pull away now. So hopefully they can stay fit. Hopefully you don't have too many injuries, things like that, and we can keep pushing on and hopefully have a good FA Cup run. Somehow stay in the Champions League for long enough. And I don't think top four is very unreasonable. It's we did it last year. It wasn't always certain that we'd be getting top four last year. So hopefully if you can pull up one of those ones again, it would definitely have me happy.
Well, it certainly is. With all this COVID and all, it's a crazy enough season for anything to happen. And to me, no one is out of that top four race at any stage. You know what I mean? Because I still believe as a Liverpool fan that the league table is lying at the moment, even though we say it never lies. But I believe it's lying. I'm going with that anyway. But it's a tough one, and it's great to have both of you on, because I know it's very raw, and it's interesting today when you look around the football community. Like, it's the usual thing. Most football fans are saddened by this. You know what I mean? Whether you're a Chelsea fan or not, with the exception of one fan base, of course, who just laugh at these things all the time. We know who that is, but we're not going to mention them anyway. This is a Chelsea podcast. But yeah, it's just crazy times. I mean, the one thing that you can take heart in as Chelsea fans is, most times when you make change, it generally leads to success. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. So there is hope going forward that, as you said, a cup run, a top four, and potentially. And listen, you're still in the Champions League, and anything can happen in the Champions League.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you both coming on. We scoured high and low for Chelsea fans to come on this. They're all at home licking their wounds. No one really wanted to come on. So fair play to both of you coming on. Alex, do you want to plug out and you're doing at the moment? Let us know what you're doing at the minute.
Yeah, well, I suppose apart from sulking over this second today, apart from that, guys, I have my own show as well. I'm actually a comedian and an actor as well. So I have a chat show that airs on Facebook Live on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. It's called Le Chats. You can find it on Facebook if you look up Le Chats, or we're at Le Chats Talk Show on Facebook. Basically, I have comedians, actors, musicians on just to basically discuss the pandemic, how the industry has been affected, because, it's basically been wiped out. Niall, you're a wrestling fan. You're heavily involved in the Irish wrestling scene. So, I mean, that's been decimated as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have the shop is shut, everything, you know what I mean? I'm literally become like a full-time podcaster during these lockdowns, So what else can I do,
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's great that that's going for you. I tell you one thing I do miss. I miss those daily jokes. They kept me going during the first lockdown. They were brilliant. I used to really enjoy them because they were so sort of like, you know, they were so cringy. They were so good, like, you know. But I really enjoyed them.
Well,
I
I'll
used to
give you
remember
one for
everything.
free if you want. I'll give you one
Yeah.
for free now if you want. Am I
Go
allowed
on.
to? Am I allowed to
Yeah.
swear? Because this joke
Oh
is a
yeah,
swear.
go on. No,
All
this
right,
is over
so
18s. Throw it out there.
it's Mickey Mouse. He's after getting divorced from Minnie Mouse, and he's in with his divorce. He's in with his therapist after getting divorced, and he's sitting there in the chair. The therapist has a notebook, and he says, "Okay, so Mickey, the last time you were in, you said that you had divorced Minnie because she was quite silly." And Mickey looks back and he says, "I never said she was quite silly. I said she was fucking goofy."
Absolutely brilliant. Well, listen,
That was a
lads,
good one.
thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. And listen, it's always good there to end the podcast with a joke. It keeps spirits up and all.
Has to be
So,
done.
for myself, Niall Hogan, Jacob, thanks for coming on. Alex,
Cheers, man. Thanks for having me.
really appreciate it.
No
Talk to you
problem, man.
guys
Thank you.
soon. Cheers.